In a surprise turn of events, one of the best games of 2019 was a remake of a 21-year-old survival horror classic, namely Resident Evil 2. Hot on the heels of that success, Resident Evil publisher Capcom has announced we're getting a remake of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis next. Even better, it's coming our way this year on the 3rd of April 2020. But it's been a long time since Resident Evil 3 came out, and maybe you just played it once back in 1999 and never again since. Or maybe you never played it. Or maybe you played it loads, but then in the intervening years you saw an alien and had your memory erased by the Men in Black. If you fit any of those descriptions, then don't worry, we're here to fill you in on what to expect from the Resident Evil 3 remake by reminding you of 7 things you may well have forgotten about Resident Evil 3. Fans of the Resident Evil series will remember that the first game was all about the Raccoon City Police Department's Special Tactics and Rescue Service, more commonly known by their fun acronym S.T.A.R.S, and also their horrible deaths. You played as either Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield from the Alpha team and spent a lot of the game happening upon the gruesome and or poorly voice-acted remains of the Bravo team scattered throughout the Spencer mansion.
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
Resident Evil 2 was notably short on S.T.A.R.S members, but they were back front and center in Resident Evil 3, albeit in a real good news, bad news kind of situation. The good news is that you played once again as Jill Valentine as she tries to escape the zombie-infested city, mostly by somersaulting through exploding windows. The bad news is that the only other S.T.A.R.S member who isn't a main character in the first game gets horribly killed in the first 5 minutes. This character is Brad Chickenheart Vickers, the team's helicopter pilot who abandons the Alphas at the start of the first game, teaching everyone a valuable lesson about why you shouldn't rely on people with the nickname Chickenheart in stressful combat situations.
No! Don't go!
Anyway, Brad shows up right at the start of the game, bringing with him his trademark cheery optimism.
Listen, he's coming for us. We're both gonna die.
And then, about 5 minutes later, Brad is horribly murdered by the Nemesis, the mutant Terminator monster that gives the game its full name. As we can see in the trailer for the new game, Brad is back for the Resi 3 remake, and he is just as brave and useful as he was the first time around.
But right now it's got a hard-on for the only 2 stars left in town.
Just how rigorous is the stars selection process anyway? The Resident Evil games are full of tough decisions for you to make. Do you shoot the zombie and waste ammo? Do you try and run around and get bitten? Or, very popular option, why not both? We call this the Andy method. But nowhere in the series have decisions been more prominent than in Resident Evil 3, which introduced the concept of what it called live selection. These were quick decision moments where the action would freeze and you'd be given 2 courses of action to choose from with a very short window in which to pick. What's more, these decisions actually mattered, determining how the next chunk of your game would play out, which items and weapons you got access to, and also whether or not you'd have to fight an extra boss fight. Of course, you could also decide to do nothing at all, but this was always the worst option, usually causing you some damage before forcing you into one of the original choices regardless. According to some reports, the Resident Evil 3 remake is going to ditch the live selection feature. QuickTime events became popular shortly after the release of the original game, and subsequent games in the series have leaned heavily on QTEs instead, which is a shame because live selection had a lot going for it, not least the cool presentation. Capcom has stated that the Resident Evil 3 remake will only have one definitive ending, whereas the original had several endings depending on your choices throughout the game. Which is fine, but the lack of live selection means I'm going to actually have to fight the Nemesis instead of just shoving him off ledges, and that is some BS, frankly. Like a close-up magic enthusiast at a party, Resident Evil characters rarely go away once they've been introduced. We've had loads of games featuring Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, and Rebecca Chambers, and you just try and stop Barry Burton showing up in every bloody Resident Evil game.
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
Not so the brand new hero introduced in Resident Evil 3, Carlos Oliveira, whose only starring role in a proper numbered Resident Evil game has been in this game.
Any objections to my playing hero this time?
What are you doing? Carlos!
This is a shame because Carlos was great despite not making the best first impression.
Calm down, lady. I'm no zombie. My name's Carlos.
He's cool, funny, and is 100% responsible for Jill's survival thanks to his preparing a vaccine for her in her time of need. Now at last, Carlos is back with a totally different, way hairier look, bringing the shaggy, vintage Rocky energy to the Resident Evil 3 remake.
It's me he's after. I'll buy you some time.
Hey, wait! Wait, Jill!
According to Capcom, you'll be playing as Carlos at various points throughout the story, giving you more background on who he is and why his team is in the city, as well as a different perspective on the game's events. Plus, his personality has been tweaked, possibly to make him less of a weirdo when you first meet him.
Wait. I have to ask you something.
I know. You want to ask me out? All the foxy ladies love my accent. It drives them crazy.
Plus, Carlos actually survived all the way to the end of his Resident Evil game, unlike, say, Steve Burnside, which makes it all the more baffling that he hasn't shown up in another main series game since. Still, at least we got through the game without Barry Burton showing up, right guys?
Thanks. You saved us.
I couldn't let you die.
Is it you?
Are you ready to finish this?
God damn it, Barry. Resident Evil 2 came out in 1998. Resident Evil 3 came out in 1999. That is a very short time in which to develop a big survival horror game, you might be thinking to yourself. And you'd be right. It is a short time, unless you reuse locations from Resident Evil 2. The story goes that Resident Evil 3 originally started life as a much shorter spin-off title meant to be an action-heavy side story companion piece to Resident Evil 2. While the actual Resident Evil 3 was developed by a different team for the as-yet unreleased PlayStation 2. That turned out to be a much bigger project than anticipated, and Capcom needed another hit, so this side project Resident Evil game got promoted to numbered main series title. It was also given an extra 2 months of development time to extend it to full game length. This is not very much development time to extend something to full game length, you might recognize. Sidebar, you're making some real pertinent observations on game development today. As a result, while Resident Evil 2 does include many cool new locations, such as some Raccoon City businesses and the infamous clock tower, a good portion of the start of the game is set inside the Raccoon City Police Department.
No!
Or to put it another way, some of Resident Evil 3 takes place where a lot of Resident Evil 2 took place. That might sound like a cop-out, no pun intended, but it's actually a great chance to see the events of Resi 2 from a different perspective and to get some backstory and closure on mysteries from Claire and Leon's story. Capcom has said that the Resident Evil 3 remake will rearrange familiar elements even more than the Resident Evil 2 remake. Therefore, even if you do remember Resi 3 well, chances are there will still be plenty of surprises to catch you off guard. Plus, although Mr. X was threatening, he never hurled himself bodily through any of the R.C.P.D's windows to try and get you, so Resi 3 had that going for it too. And speaking of the Nemesis, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was the game that introduced the Nemesis, who is 7 feet of gross tentacly bad news poured into a trenchcoat and armed with a rocket launcher. Being slowly pursued by a trench-coated tyrant wasn't new to players thanks to Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, but the Nemesis was even more relentless than his hat-wearing forebearer. It also appears to be more intelligent than previous tyrants on account of its ability to speak. It can only say one word, sure, but sometimes it's how you say things, you know? Exactly, thank you. Anyway, Nemesis in the Resident Evil 3 remake is apparently going to be even more relentless and awful than he was in the original game, using an advanced version of the AI that drove Mr. X in the Resident Evil 2 remake. This upgraded Nemesis is also untethered, says Capcom, meaning he can pursue you outside of buildings, like in the original, but 100% more terrifying because Jesus, look at him now! He even starts out wearing a mask, which, I hate to break it to you guy, but I don't think that's going to do a great job hiding your identity. Also, he has a flamethrower now, so that's fun. We dread to think what the modders are going to do with the Nemesis once the Resident Evil 3 remake comes out though. You know, considering what they did to Mr. X in Resident Evil 2.
Jesus Christ!
Speaking of the Nemesis being the worst, at one point in the game he actually infects you, Jill Valentine, with the T-virus. The nerve! It looks like this aspect of the story will return for the remake if the trailer, which features flashes of a zombified Jill, is anything to go by. Maybe the impact has since been dulled by similar stories in the Resident Evil series, but at the time, the player character being infected with the very virus that had turned everyone in the city into the shambling undead was a big shock and added time pressure to the story.
I've been infected by the virus, haven't I?
Hey! Take it easy.
And where the Resident Evil 2 remake went for a more grounded approach to the monsters you faced, for instance by removing the giant spiders, Resident Evil 3 has no such qualms. Ahead of Resi 3's release, Capcom has confirmed that the spiders will be returning, and, as a nice bit of foreshadowing for the overlapping stories, a recent patch for the Resident Evil 2 demo added the distant sound of Nemesis going about his murdery business. You'll be fine, Leon, just don't ask for a transfer to the S.T.A.R.S unit. And you did say you loved giant spiders, right? Lastly, it's worth remembering that Resident Evil 3 was the game that introduced the world to the Mercenaries mode. Mercenaries mode was the time attack mode that featured in tons of subsequent Resi games, and in it you had to kill as many enemies as possible while battling a time limit, low ammo, and a restricted loadout. The bad news for Mercenaries fans is that the mode won't be making a return for the Resident Evil 3 remake. The good news for everyone else is that it's being replaced with something that sounds way better called Resident Evil Resistance. Resident Evil Resistance is an asymmetrical multiplayer survival horror game in which 4 players play as survivors trying to escape the city, while 1 player plays as the Mastermind, whose job is to place obstacles in the survivors' way in order to prevent them from escaping. Each of the survivors has unique skills that they'll need to use to help them escape, and the Mastermind watches everything through security cameras and can set traps like in S.T.A.R., but also take direct control of monsters and zombies to kill people, unlike S.T.A.R. Resistance sounds interesting, kind of like what the Resident Evil Outbreak series could have been if the internet worked properly when it was first released, so we're keen to check it out for ourselves. Those were 7 things you may have forgotten about Resident Evil 3. Or not. Maybe you have Total Recall. In which case, how excited are you for the remake? And what were the names of the other UCBS members who weren't Carlos? I can never remember. Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to like and subscribe for more on the game coming soon. Thanks for watching!